All right, good morning, everyone. Quick show of hands. How many of you took a Waymo here? Okay, if you wrote a Waymo, that's your first agent, I think a robotic agent. And my name is Srini Raghavan. I lead our Copilot and Agent Ecosystem at Microsoft. And I'm thrilled to have you all here, and maybe 20,000 of you online as well. So it's great to be here. So we have a powerhouse of a panel today. The session today is all about how do you make these agents real in the real world, right? How does it actually run in the business? And cutting through the hype and the noise that you often hear in terms of AI and agents, and getting to the real stuff. And also to be able to share some real frameworks, models, tips and tricks, and in terms of what makes it actually work and tick. So I'm going to start with one question, if you have been paying attention over the last 3 days. How many agents does IDC predict would be out there in the world in the next 3 years? Just shout out some numbers. Okay, clearly people have been paying attention. 1.3 billion agents is what IDC is predicting that's going to be in the workforce. And just to put things in perspective, right, that is almost like having one India or one China, 1.3 billion digital workers out in the workforce very soon. And how do you manage all of that? And what makes it real? And if you were to really think about an interesting stat, right? What is the energy consumption of a human being on a daily basis? It's close to 58 kilowatts per hour. And if you take a similar energy consumption of an AI agent, depending on RAG, or if you want to do some more complex reasoning, or to be able to have a complete orchestrator, it's anywhere from 0.3 kilowatts to 2 kilowatts. So it's a fraction in terms of what you think from an energy consumption standpoint. So we'll dive right into it in terms of saying, how did you build agents, and how do we start actually deploying agents in enterprise? So before that, I would love to have a quick intro from each one of you, starting with Mona Riemenschneider from BASF. Absolutely thrilled to have you here. You have close to 38,000 Copilot seats within your organization. So tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So hi, everybody. I'm super excited to be here, and thank you very much, Srini, for the invite to today's customer panel. I'm Mona Riemenschneider. I'm within BASF since 10 years as a communication professionalist in diverse roles in internal and external communications. And within 2 years, I'm within BASF Agriculture Solutions, which is one out of 6 segments of the BASF group, covering a portfolio of crop protection products, digital solutions, biosolutions, as well as vegetable seeds. And I'm leading the global online communication team, which is managing our corporate social media channels, our website, and we are really looking into how we can integrate generative artificial intelligence into our communication activities. And you already mentioned the Copilot license within BASF. So overall, before I start digging a little bit deeper into the specific use cases I want to present today, for us, AI and AI enablement is really a clear and key pillar of our BASF Winning Ways strategy. It is part of our strategic driver Accelerate, where we really look into how can we create value by using AI technologies. And we are doing it twofold. On the one hand, we have this big rollout of our Copilot licenses, really enabling our colleagues to use powerful AI tools into their daily working flows. And on the other way, we are looking into very customized agent technologies and how we can create a real impact here. Our agents, and within BASF Agriculture Solutions, we have over 1,000 agents already in place, are working with Azure AI Foundry and Copilot Studio. And of course, I could talk about several agent examples, but I would highlight today our AP CommsMate, which is a writing assistant as an agent available in a Copilot and MS Teams, and it's helping our colleagues to create content, for example, very personalized social media posts, on brand, very target specific. It also helps in refining content that is already existing, and it's used, and that's also a main advantage of the tool, as our main database, so to say, because we have trained it on all of our communication data as press releases, websites, brand content. So it really knows how we are communicating within BASF Agricultural Solutions on writing style, tonality, etc.
So one thing to note is the 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 agent, and this is a complete coincidence. Just a few days ago in Germany, it won an award for AI, the best AI and intelligent platform for communications.
Sure.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. We'll dive a little deeper into that in terms of exactly what does 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 do? How does it actually help your colleagues as well and within your businesses? But before we get to that, John, I want to talk to you. EY, huge partner, customers of Microsoft, 135,000 Copilot seats or users that are in use today, and maybe 200,000 if you didn't include the folks that are still being deployed to. Tell us a little bit about your role and the one specific tax assistant agent that you guys have implemented.
Sure, and thanks for letting us come here and talk a little bit about our journey so far with Microsoft and AI. I'm John Whittaker. I run the AI platform and products solution for EY Fabric. So it's a global capability that we deliver to our member firms and our service lines. EY itself is a well-known brand, 400,000 fantastic employees helping our clients with tax, audit, consulting, and many other areas. We really embraced AI in a big way a couple of years ago as the sort of generative movement landed, and we've been transforming our business, the business of our clients and the world, working closely with Microsoft. We do have a little over 41,000 Copilot agents in production and over 1,000 other agentic technologies.
41,000 agents?
Yep, in production.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're at scale, moving fast to the Pattern 3 frontier firm is a big part of my mission and the mission of the teams that are driving that here. Today I want to talk a little bit about where we've gone with a particularly interesting Copilot agent that leverages Copilot tuning. We can talk a little bit more in depth around it, but it's a tax assistant. So when you give advice, you want to have your own sort of deep knowledge as an expert in the space, but gaining additional insights so that you can deliver broader, better, more capable answers is certainly something that Copilot can help with if you bring the right data. And we definitely have had a great experience so far in the Copilot tuning. And if you'd like, happy to chat a little bit further it, or we can move.
No, we'll come back to that. So thank you for that. And those of you, if you are counting, and so John said 400,000 employees, and I said 137,000 Copilot users. And what about the rest? So those are paid licenses. You also have Copilot chat users who actually have a lot more users across their enterprise. So thank you for the partnership.
Absolutely. We're all in on Microsoft.
Thank you. Sean, coming back to you, Lumen Technology, one of the leading companies, and we have been working with you for a long time. And you've been a great partner in terms of using the cutting edge aspect of Copilot Studio as well as Copilot. Tell us a little bit about your role, yourself, and the executive briefings agent. How did that come about? What does it do?
Great, thank you. Again, thanks for having us, Srini. So Sean Alexander, I'm Senior Vice President of Connected Ecosystem at Lumen. And our role is basically to be the trusted backbone, the network for AI. Most people don't realize that over the next 3 years, about as much CapEx is going to be spent on reweaving the backbone of the internet for delivery of AI services. About as much CapEx as what's being spent on addressing the energy challenges that you talked about earlier. And so when we think about our strategy, it's really focused in 3 areas. The first, of course, is having a world-class physical network, having a set of digital services, so cybersecurity being a good example. We actually just launched 2 of our offerings in Microsoft Marketplace this week. And then the third is around the connected ecosystem, which is what I lead, which is really around establishing the right partnerships and building out a set of services that are better together with our ISV and SI partners. And in terms of how we're using Copilot today, we were actually one of the earliest adopters of Copilot, working very closely with Microsoft. And we're now at a point that I can speak for my own team, that the first thing that every new hire does in terms of their new employee orientation is that they get a Copilot license, because it's effectively become like oxygen inside of our organization. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of different examples, one of which is how we're using it within our executive leadership team, which I think is often not discussed as much, but as well as in terms of sales, customer service, and even our legal department.
Awesome. We'll come back to the specifics of that in terms of what really changed, what's the inflection point, and how it actually helps you. The one thing that we do know, which we'll get to the mechanics of the agent itself, is if folks are familiar with the researcher agent that we have in Microsoft 365 Copilot, I think Lumen is one of the few companies that actually chained the researcher with a declarative agent and being able to work that together. So
that's right. In fact, our CEO, Kate Johnson, uses this Copilot that we built. So basically using Microsoft Research and declarative agents. And those who may not be as familiar with declarative agents, you're not doing hands-on keyboard coding in order to design it. You're using expression. And so when preparing for individual customer and partner engagements, it's become an essential tool in terms of not just looking at the relationship that we have as a company, but also looking at external sources of data, Edgar data, SEC filings, understanding movements that are happening inside of the organization, and it significantly reduces the cognitive load for a senior executive, while at the same time allowing them to focus on what's really going to move the business forward.
Awesome. So Tim, last but not least, Pfizer has been at the forefront of not just some leading edge drug discovery as well as drug development, but also a great partner at Microsoft. And I remember working with Pfizer all the way from M365 and deploying teams globally. So coming back to Copilot, I know you have this agent. Can you tell a little bit about, in terms of yourself, your role, what is Deviation Solver Pro?
Yeah, so
what is that?
Thanks again for having me up here, Srini. My role, I'm really in charge of a few different areas around AI, but really focused on Copilot, Copilot Studio, and citizen development. I've also been heavily involved in one of our external-facing AIs called Health Answers, which is powered more by Azure, not by Copilot Studio, since that didn't exist when we started that program. But really focused on trying to help enable all of our colleagues to use Copilot and Copilot Studio. And so for us, we have about 37,000 Copilot licensed users at Pfizer, and which is just about half of our workforce. So we've totally dove into this head first. And what's really exciting is we've got big programs leveraging Copilot Studio and small ones. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I know it has one on there. One of the programs we're doing is around a call center agent. So to help our call center customer service reps actually get real-time telemetry, real-time information that they can use to answer the customer queries. We think that'll really help provide a better experience for folks that are calling into Pfizer. So that's like sort of a bigger project that we're running on Copilot Studio. The one that I've listed here, and I didn't name it Deviation Solver Pro, not my name, but it's one person at Pfizer had an idea and was like, hey, I really think that Copilot Studio can help me solve this. So it's an example where there's no developers, nobody extra, but one single colleague went in, solved a really interesting problem on our floor, and it shows to me the power of citizen development and what we can really get by letting that model repeat itself over and over again with all of our colleagues. So that's a big passion of mine and a big, I think, enabler of the future of how Pfizer gets work done.
So really, starting with the citizen developer, one person starting it all, right? And folks, if you are actually a little bit on the fence or skeptical about how this all got started, right? And this is one great example where there is one citizen developer that took it upon himself or herself to be able to just build this agent out, and then people saw value. There are three things that we will cover today. One is the value itself, right? Hey, what is the value of AI and agents? We keep talking about agents. Is it really providing the value to the enterprise? How do I actually justify the ROI to my CFO or to folks who actually spend the money on it? The second piece is also what John talked about is in terms of scale. How do you take it from a pilot user, a set of pilot community, to scale? How do you take it to scale? And what are some of the angles that we have to approach from a model and framework standpoint as well? And last but not least, I think the most important thing is also the security and compliance piece. Like security and compliance as a design input and not an afterthought as you develop and build these agents out, because it's an enterprise gig, right? I think you want to make sure that it's actually not doing something that you don't want it to be doing. So John, coming back to you, EY tax assistant, let's start there, right? How do you use it internally, and how did you actually come to define the use case to begin with? And do you actually use it to actually help your clients and customers outside as well?
Yeah, certainly. So it all really began with a broader initiative to drive the transformation motion forward. You know, we've been aggressively pushing the envelope on what AI can do and how we can change our business to make it more capable, provide additional value, et cetera. We think that this is going to change everything that is aligned with our type of work. At our core, we're a massive repository of knowledge and a huge army of folks who bring that knowledge to our customers. And this technology is an incredible democratizing agent for those types of capabilities. So we wanted to be able to leverage that new reality in a way that still aligned with our existing business models, would allow us to improve and add value to our customers in the experience. And this really offered a sort of perfect method by which we could do it, because it aligns very closely with how we already operate, right? You know, when you are looking at driving an advisory service, you have your expertise, you stay up on the knowledge, but you always need to go back to, you know, source materials as well as, you know, what's new and changing. And in the tax world, at a global level, there's more than 100 tax changes per day, every day, 365 days a year. It never stops changing. When you think about every municipality, every, you know, country, every vagary, every component, every aspect of how the world operates, it's constantly changing. And to be able to keep that at the fingertips of the advisors is a huge competitive advantage in the offerings, and allows us to continue to scale out our capabilities more broadly. And we have all kinds of interesting ideas where we'll take it going forward. So it absolutely is providing value both to our users internally in making them more capable and reducing some of the drudgery work. And at the same time, it's improving the service quality that we provide to our customers.
So one quick thing on the tuning. Can we talk a little bit about tuning? You mentioned tuning.
Absolutely.
So tuning is, you have Copilot. So we also provide services in terms of being able to take the out-of-the-box Copilot and tune it specific to your organizational knowledge, style, tone, tenor, so that the Copilot actually behaves exactly like your organization. So talk a little bit about that. How did you apply that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, Copilot gives you access to the graph. What was then Tenant Copilot has now become Copilot fine-tuning, allows you to take in documents and bring them into your large language model and sort of align it in a way that allows for the answers to be, you know, more accurate, more verbose, et cetera, and more relevant. And when you couple that closely with, a RAG solution that might have the days changes on what's happened within your particular field, that offers an incredible value over just kind of the regular large language model type deployments, which can be very good, but nowhere near the quality of what you get out of a fine-tuned model. For sure, that's the big offering that it brings to the table. In our case, we fine-tuned with a little over 21 million documents, all of it, general research or public domain type data points, and it really sort of aligns the core model in a way that it's kind of more of an expert in the area, and you add the additional data and the expertise of the human, and you get a better outcome.
Got it. Sean, going back to you, I know there is a technical part of the solution which may be the easiest part to implement, but there is also the adoption, change management, the frameworks that you use to be able to just, how do you actually think about this in a huge organization like Lumen? And what practical frameworks or advice that you may offer to the folks who may be looking to do something similar? And you may want to touch on, how does your CEO use this agent, starting with that?
Sure. Well, let's start off with kind of my personal approach. I'm a pragmatist when it comes to AI. AI has become a bit of a term of art. It means something a little bit different to everyone. So I have a ground rule on my team, which is that we don't need an AI strategy any more than we need a hammer or shovel strategy. The reason is because the framework that we use is 3 points. The first one is identify what is the business problem, the business outcome that you want to drive. And this is where, in my experience both with Lumen as well as previously, it's very important that you really narrow down with the team and ensure that it's achievable. The second point is around practical applications. So when you're identifying which tool to use to solve for a particular problem, you want to make sure that you're picking the right solution. And the third thing is making sure that you have the measurement, that the team very clearly understands the KPI, the outcomes that you want to drive as a part of that specific engagement. And so what we found is that you have kind of this natural inclination to large tops-down initiatives. What I have found personally is that the most valuable is the bottoms-up approach. That when you get your team together on a Friday, you identify specific business challenges that are impeding or creating friction in the organization, and then you start to use Copilot Studio in order to solve for those specific problems. And then you measure the output over time. That drives tremendous success. We'll come back to the CEO here in a second, but one of the things is that we were one of the first adopters of Copilot for sales, and we're seeing tremendous improvement. A lot of what our business is involved in is really contractual, re-uppance of contracts, et cetera. A lot of email back and forth and engagement with those customers. And we're seeing about a 30% increase in performance and productivity among our sales organization just by adopting Copilot for sales and providing them the right training. You don't necessarily train your CEO. It's kind of the other way around. In our case, Kate, she was one of the first adopters, and I'm a big believer that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so she leads from the front as we are now an AI-first enterprise organization. And so one of the things that she does is using the declarative agent. She brought together a team of our top business professionals as well as engineers and said, look, what I want to be able to do is drive more meaningful impact in the engagements I'm having with my peers, and context is key. Like, help me to understand the context in terms of where our business is today, but also where's the puck moving at a macroeconomic perspective, but also where are the opportunities for alignment between our organizations. And so what it's done is basically taken the pre-brief amount of time down from days down to hours, and in some cases minutes, where she can get real-time updates right before the next meeting.
So this is real. You guys are using this internally.
This is very real.
There's production usage.
That's right. And so now we've deployed similar technologies within the entire senior leadership team. So for myself, from a business development perspective, I have a tool that's tuned specifically to our connected ecosystem team that provides me the same level of context specific to our partner relationships and how the teams are moving forward going into the future. Yeah.
Got it. Mona, on your front, right, if you could help describe, how did you, of all the things that you could do with Agent and Copilot, how did you land on this 𝗲𝗻𝗀, which is basically a writing assistant? And how does it help in real words, in real world and real terms, BASF, or specifically your group?
When we started talking and discussing the first use case for AP 𝗲𝗻𝗀, it was already in spring 2023, starting with the idea of a standalone app, and then it really transformed into an agent over time. We had several challenges we wanted to be solved by the agent. On the one hand, it's very difficult to bring all of the data we have at our communication department really into one tool, so we wanted to ensure that everyone, all of our communication colleagues worldwide really have the same access, transparent and in an easy and very intuitive way. So that's why we also decided very quickly, together with Microsoft as our strategic long-term partner here in this case, to bring it into the M365 environment and then also bring it into Copilot. Because I always think you need to go where the colleagues are really working with, so bringing it into their actual working environment. And then we were talking about, okay, how we can easily give them an access to the whole topic of Gen AI and agent transformation. So how can we really enable our colleagues in an easy way to use our writing assistant in their daily workflows, and also to get familiar with AI technology overall. So these were some of the ideas we had in the beginning, and then as a communicator, of course, we always want to communicate consistently with one voice in the outside world. So we needed an agent that is really trained on our communication material, that understands our brand, knows our brand. That was our main target. Really can also work with the writing style and tonality we have. And that's why we then decided to develop the app and then the agent over time. And it's used at the moment for 500 communication and marketing communication worldwide. We also have some colleagues from PGA, so from the political communication, sustainability, and HR, that are using it already every day. And it helps them to do content creation. They also get, for example, image suggestions per copy. So that's a new feature we have implemented into the agent. And we can see that it, on the one hand, we really have a lot of efficiency gains. Our colleagues can communicate faster and more efficient. We have a big time saving overall, so tasks that took hours or minutes before are now done within seconds. And we could ensure that we really have a transparent access to everyone worldwide to get the same communication material they can use.
So on brand-aligned communications, very unified in terms of one voice, the whole of BASF agricultural group actually communicates, as well as it also has some additional features that it actually goes and looks at your social media in terms of things that may be out of whack, and how it actually alerts people as well in terms of things that you may want to be able to look at in real time as well, right? So Tim, shifting gears, talking about the value, right? Can you talk a little bit about this agent? Okay, you had this agent, we developed this and deployed this, and we worked very closely with your team as well. What is the value? Can you quantify this a little bit in terms of real terms? How does Pfizer use this, and what's next for it?
Yeah, so what we found is kind of each agent has its own value, right, that you assign to it. So I liked your point about figuring out what the KPI is up front, especially for our larger programs. That's really helpful. So in this case, with Deviation Solver Pro, the value is really about just the time saved, right? So our colleague, he saw an opportunity to say, all right, I've got this process where I get notified when something goes wrong on the floor, when something's outside of the norms. I now have to go log that in another system, and then we have to kick off a whole investigation. So what he did completely on his own was say, hey, I can use Copilot Studio to automate that process. First, just let me not be the go-between to get the alert and then go put it into the other system. So he automated that process. But then on top of that, he said, you know what, I've got all this historical data, so I have a ton of records of every single time this has happened in the past, what the root causes were. So he fed that into Copilot as well, and so now it will actually predict what it thinks the first 5 root causes we should be looking at. So it essentially just helps kickstart the investigation process. All that saves, like at the first pass, it's just a lot of time. It helps our teams get to the root of the problem faster. It helps them focus on the stuff that really matters and not have to worry about sort of the busy work of the process. So that's a key metric for us just in that one. Some of our other stuff, like in the call center, it's really about how can we provide a better experience? How are the customers more satisfied? Are they getting the answers quicker? Are we able to get through the resolution with that customer faster, right? So it's really, that's about time.
And you measure that in terms
Yes.
of before and after?
Yes, we're measuring in terms of before and after, like how long the calls last, the time to resolution, and then also customer satisfaction as well. So, but measuring is really key because then you can start to prove to yourself and to everybody else, this has so much value. Now let's go do it in another area, right? And I think I told you yesterday we have dozens and dozens of call centers. So being able to start with a couple of them, make them more efficient, then gives us the opportunity to do it again and again and just make better and better efficiency gains as we go. So,
got it. So Sean, looking at you from a scale standpoint, right? How do you approach this beyond just having this as a science experiment, so to speak, right? In terms of making sure that folks have access to it, the change management piece. Talk about scale a little bit.
You bet. So it starts off with no science experiments. In fact, among acronyms, a POC or a proof of concept is kind of a dirty acronym in my team. We focus on minimum viable product. Anything that we are working on, we build with a bias for deployment, ideally in the tenant that it will actually reside over time. And so when we think about scale as an organization, it starts off again back to the point of measurement and that 3-point framework. Once we feel that we've gotten to a certain gate in terms of quality, we'll go ahead and deploy the Copilot in basically rings, depending upon the team role and discipline. As you mentioned earlier, we literally have tens of thousands of employees that are now using Copilot, both in terms of what I'll call their own augmented intelligence in terms of doing their daily work, but then also using Copilots and agents for teamwork. What we have found is basically there's 3 things in terms of core impact. First of all, start them early. When you join Lumen, you get Copilot immediately, and we encourage you to use it like oxygen in order to ramp up quickly within the organization. The time that historically we've talked about, it takes about 6 months for a new employee to be able to become fully realized in terms of their potential, is getting shaved down to 4 months and down to 3 months, because anything from acronyms to understanding context around historical decision making is now augmented through Copilot in the kind of the graph, the Lumen graph in terms of what we understand about the business. The second thing is really around, as you think about the business process automation, we all live through RPA. This is very different than just robotic process automation the way it existed before. We're seeing real and tangible results in areas we didn't anticipate. A good example is our legal department. In partnership with the marketing department, they identified that first review of new marketing collateral is taking up a lot of let's be honest, expensive time. Somebody goes to law school, to be sitting there and reviewing that content can be expensive. So the idea there is that the teams have gotten together and actually have built a Copilot to assist in doing that first read, that first review of the content. I'd say the third thing in terms of driving scale is really around ensuring that you have the right training in place. So over 20,000 of our employees have gone through Copilot training. We actually measure fluency inside the organization in terms of how they're using it, and ensure that we have a coaching map for our employees so that they understand, here's how you're using it today. It's not Search 2.0. Ensure that they're building that fluency up to advanced levels.
Got it. Before we get to you, I want to just throw it back to the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. We have microphones in the room, or we can repeat it. Yeah. Questions that you want to ask of the audience? So there is one here.
This is to Tim.
Yep.
Tim, so at Pfizer, are you guys using devices, measurements, real time as part of the deviation solver? So for example, you see a temperature increase. Is that going into the database and flagging something?
So yeah, it's anything on the floor. So to be fair, I'm not the one who built the agent, but so I'm not exactly sure all the different devices they have connected in, but it's anything that's throwing an alert into our automated system. He's then catching and then passing on. So it's anything sort of outside of the norms that our machines would throw off. So it's a part of our normal standard process, but they just automated it.
Any other questions in the room, folks? Any burning questions that you may have in terms of adoptions, model, frameworks, practical tips? Okay, please. It may be easier to walk the mic around. I think people may be comfortable.
So, yeah, I think this is for all. Now what I hear is that Copilot is taken into use and help in the existing processes and to speed up the work. But do you see in the future that you would actually revamp the processes to be more AI native rather than just continue with the same methods as today?
Sure, I'm happy to go there.
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a terrific question, and one that I think businesses are struggling with at the moment, right? We're probably living in some version of the horseless carriage. We haven't got to the car yet, and you're rightfully saying, when do we get to the car? Today, driving worker productivity, improving quality of life balance, and the P&L and all the other fun stuff that comes with that sort of transformative change is the current motion that most organizations are aligning with. We're beginning to see line of travel that really will allow us to completely transform the experiences. At EY, and I'll just keep it oriented around tax since that's where we started and where we've been talking about. We have about 30 million documented processes that exist within that particular global organization. And moving those processes faster through agentic assistants like Copilot are kind of the low-hanging fruit to get to an improved outcome. But really, if we could imagine a world where we start to abstract the various processes, the various applications where data sits, and getting to outcomes faster is really the game that is going to land going forward. And we're looking forward to partnering with Microsoft both on Copilot and with your line of travel around Agent 365, and the rest of the portfolio. I think is all heavily targeted in that area, in that trajectory. If 2025 was the year of the agent, then 2026 will be the year of the agents. And that's really where I think we're going to see a lot of the consolidation of processes into far faster, more real-time, improved outcomes. So
I'll just add too, Pfizer, we're obviously very process-centric, right? So for us, it's a multi-step process in the sense that you start with solving what's there, right? So let's not try to reinvent the processes right out of the gate, because folks need to understand how AI works for them. They need to gain trust in it. So that takes time. So for us, it's really starting slow with how do we take the processes that are there, automate them more with AI, and help assist them with AI. Then I think we get to that next stage, which is exactly what you're saying, which is, all right, now folks have enough confidence. Now we can start to think through how should we change the processes. That's an exciting place to be. But for us, it's taking that step-by-step approach, because we can't just throw out the processes right out of the gate. We've got to follow them through for a lot of good reasons. But I think that's where we're definitely heading, is having everyone thinking about, I've solved this process, and follow it exactly the way it exists today. Now let's blow it up and reimagine it, and that's exciting.
Yeah,
Do you want to add to it,
from,
Sean? Yeah.
from our perspective, I mean, we're not your mom's telephone or telecommunications company. So we've taken a slightly different approach in terms of forward thinking. In fact, we're part of Microsoft Work Lab, the inaugural group of frontier firm companies. Working with Harvard, in fact, we spent a week with Microsoft and Harvard looking at specifically where is the puck moving. We are absolutely in the early innings of agentic technology. And so what we're experimenting with right now and really figuring out is we're kind of in that level 1, we're getting to level 2 and level 3 agentic AI. So if you think about, level 1 is largely human to agent. Level 2 is when you have human to multi-agent, and then level 3 is when you have full orchestration happening between the different agents. And so we've fully adopted MCP inside of our organization, so Model Context Protocol, for enabling inter-agent communication. And now, so we're focusing on where do we want the business to be in 36 months, and working back from that and ensuring that we have the right set of tools, the right set of training, and the right set of agents in order to enable that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anything? So one thing I want to offer up is if folks are interested in terms of, we have something called forward deployed engineers that Microsoft can work with your firm or company in terms of being able to envision, reimagine a business process, or being able to think in terms of how an agent can actually help a workflow. Work with your account team, will be able to actually help you with that. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned training, coaching, and measuring the fluency of Copilot. Can you tell me what tools or how you do that?
Sure, there's a couple of different tools. So built into Copilot, you have the ability through telemetry and dashboards to understand down to the individual, what percentage of their time and how are they using Copilot, which is a really important tool, a trusted tool in terms of how you use it as an organization. So as a senior leadership team, we actually hold ourselves accountable in terms of evaluating ourselves. And as I go through my daily work, what percentage of my time am I actually using Copilot and related tools in order to really change the way that we think about both the culture as well as the workflow. The second is a personal framework that I have. I actually recommend Reid Hoffman's book, Super Agency, which is really about agency over your life, agency over work. He has a four-part archetype model. So you have your doomers, you have your gloomers, you have your zoomers, and you have your bloomers in terms of attitudes within your organization towards AI. And so obviously I think the doomers and gloomers, we can pretty much figure out, we've heard people talk, but it's actually the zoomers are the ones that you really need to focus on responsible AI. But the bloomers are the ones who are the pragmatists, the ones that you want to actually put into positions of leadership on projects that are adopting AI. And then we actually use Microsoft's AI Fluency map in terms of understanding from novice individual use all the way up through advanced usage. And then map basically with our teams, where do you think you are in terms of your journey of adopting and embracing AI, both as an individual contributor, but also as a contributor to projects. And then we grow together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we entirely leave that subject, I completely agree with everything you said, and certainly from EY's perspective, we drive a big AI enablement program across the entire employee base, from the CEO, Janet, all the way down through everybody goes through it and gets certified. It's a core component. But there's a layer that is there in addition to that of champions, people who have emerged as very capable, proactive advocates that have really made a massive difference. So if you're not doing that yet in your environment, I would recommend it. Being able to reach out to somebody in the same office or building or work area it's an immeasurable value, because everybody wants to gain the advantage of it, and everybody's moving at a different pace. And just having the programmatic frameworks in place is that's a big part of it. But having somebody that they can call that's going to walk them through it and share this and celebrate the wins as you go along. That's another big aspect that I think is important and a big part of why we've been so successful.
I think in the book Tipping Point, they talk about the concept of mavens, right? I mean, every organization have these mavens who actually are the champions and who actually help build, expand and amplify the whole aspect of it. Yes?
Hi, good morning. I have two questions. How many MCP servers do your organization currently operate, and how many you would forecast in the next 6 months and a year? That's my first question.
What is the first one? M36, how many M36?
How many MCP servers you guys
MCP
adopting
servers.
already right now, and how many you think you will be adopting in the next year?
I don't know the stats.
Does anybody
on that,
have
but you know, we're a very large organization. There would be an incredible number that would be out there, and we're starting to contemplate new architectural approaches, you know, MCP buses and things like that, given the scale of what we're looking at, so we can improve, you know, redundancy and security and other aspects of our MCP deployments. I would say that it's a fantastic technology. It's still early days. It's improving. It's certainly reached the stage of consensus very fast. And everybody's using them everywhere in different ways. Some have optimized their deployments, some have not. So, you know, I would get close to the optimized outcomes as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for being here. Once again, a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you all. Yeah, thank you.